When we think of someone like Stonewall Jackson, we usually think of battlefields. But what if the real story, the story of the man himself, is hidden in the places he called home? Today, we're going to trace his life through the buildings that shaped him, and we'll find out which ones you can actually still go and visit. So, here's our roadmap. We're starting in the hills of West Virginia, where it all began. Then we'll follow his early military career, check out the one and only home he ever bought, and then dive into his wartime headquarters before we reach his final days. But first, let's just think about this for a second. How can a simple house or a temporary office really tell you anything about a person? Well, these places, they're not just brick and mortar. They're like time capsules, right? They connect us to the past in a way that just reading a book can't. All right, let's start our journey. We're heading back to the rugged hills of what's now West Virginia, a place that would shape young Thomas Jackson in some pretty profound ways. Jackson's life started out in a pretty humble home in Clarksburg. But, tragedy hit his family almost immediately. He was just 2 years old when his father died, and that one event just plunged his family into poverty and really set the tone for a tough childhood. After his mom died too, Jackson ended up at his uncle's mill. And this place, Jackson's Mill, this really became his home. Living and working there, around the grist mill and sawmill, is where he developed that famous self-reliance and quiet determination he was known for later in life. So the big question is, can you actually go see this place? And the answer is yes. Jackson's Mill is now a state 4-H camp. And that original grist mill? It's a museum. You can literally get a feel for the world that made him who he was. Okay, so from that rustic life at the mill, Jackson's life is about to take a massive turn. In 1842, he heads off to start a military career that's going to take him far, far away from those West Virginia hills. He goes to West Point, graduates, serves with distinction in the Mexican-American War, but then he got kind of bored with the peacetime army. He was looking for something different, and that search brought him right back to Virginia, this time as a professor at VMI in 1851. And this move brings us to a really crucial, really personal chapter in his life, and to the only house that Stonewall Jackson would ever actually own. Now just look at this house. This simple brick townhouse shows us a totally different Jackson. This isn't a general's headquarters. This is a professor's home. It was his little sanctuary of peace right before the storm of war. So in 1858, Jackson bought this house, and for a life that had seemed so much upheaval, this was a huge deal, a real symbol of stability. He and his wife, Mariana, made a life here for just a few short years. But then, 1861 came, the war started, and he left, never to live here again. The house itself has had quite a journey. Long after the Jacksons, it actually became a community hospital for almost 50 years before it was finally turned into the historic museum we see today. So can you walk through this incredibly personal space? Yes, you absolutely can. The Virginia Military Institute runs it as a museum, and it's been restored to look just like it did when the Jacksons were there. And then 1861 hits, and Jackson's life just pivots dramatically. He trades that quiet life in Lexington for the battlefield. And, as you'd expect, his living quarters changed right along with his new job as a military commander. So, check this out. This beautiful Gothic revival house in Winchester. This became Jackson's headquarters during the winter of 61 to 62. And it was from this command center that he planned his legendary Shenandoah Valley campaign, that series of victories that really made his name. Yeah, this table just lays out the contrast perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got a private home, a place for family. On the other, a temporary military headquarters for a general at war. The whole purpose, the style, the time frame, everything just flips, mirroring the massive changes in his life and in the country. Here's another great story that tells you a lot about the man. At Moss Neck Manor, he was offered the huge, grand plantation house to use as his headquarters. But what did he do? He chose a small, simple office building on the property instead. That one choice just screams practicality, right? No frills, even when he was famous. Okay, so can you visit these wartime spots? The Winchester headquarters is a definite yes. It's a public museum, easy to get to. Moss Neck Manor, though, is still a private home, but they do open it up for tours now and then so you can get a rare look at his life in the field. All right, now we come to the end of the story, the final and really tragic chapter of Jackson's life, and the last places he would ever know. At the absolute height of his career, the unthinkable happens. In May of 1863, at the Battle of Chancellorsville, Jackson is accidentally shot by his own men. His arm had to be amputated, and they moved him away from the front lines, hoping he would recover. He was brought here, to this tiny office building at a railroad stop called Gwinney Station. It was supposed to be a safe place to heal, but he developed pneumonia. This little building, which was never meant to be anything more than a temporary refuge, became the place where he spent his last days. Today, it's known as the Jackson Shrine. And yes, this solemn place is still here. It's preserved as part of the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park. So visitors can actually stand in the very room where his life came to an end. After he died, Jackson's body was brought back to Lexington, the town he truly considered home. His long journey from the hills of West Virginia to the bloody battlefields of the war was finally over, bringing everything full circle. So this leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? When you look back at all these places, the grist mill, the professor's house, the military headquarters, and that quiet room where he died, which one really tells you the most about the man? Was it the hardworking kid at the mill, the family man in Lexington, or the brilliant general in the field? I think the real answer is probably scattered across all of them.